what needs to be said here is that the government has announced, as it normally does, it's true to form with them, a new flight from Bilbao to Gibraltar provided by Volotea. Now, when they announced it, right, with the usual hype and fanfare and brouhaha, they didn't make any comment or caveat it with the fact, this glaring, if the sources are correct from Europa Sur, this glaring omission, which is that apparently, and it's as basic point as that, the Volotea doesn't have the required licenses. Now, it is simply not good enough for the government, and in this case the Minister for Tourism, to say, well, it's the airline's responsibility to seek the licenses. That may in fact and legally be the case. It's not going to be the Gibraltar government's responsibility. But what the Gibraltar government cannot and should not do, and it is our responsibility as an opposition to expose, because they're the ones responsible, right, is pretend that it's all fine. State with a lot of fanfare that these flights are going to be starting in July until September, when in fact there is a serious, if these sources are to be believed and to be correct, serious underlying issue.
Well, you question why the government made the announcement about the Airlink before the required permits and authorisations were in place. But the fact is, Volotea were the first ones to make the announcement.
Look, that is really dealing with a minutiae, dealing with semantics, quite frankly. That anybody should suggest, well, it's not us who made the announcements, it was Volotea, is quite frankly, with all due respect to anybody who suggests that, it's ridiculous. The fact, undeniable fact is, and you've got not just the government participating in the Volotea press release, again, with all the excitement, new flights, is the things we're doing, all the work we're doing, and we want new flights. The opposition wants you. I'm the first one who will welcome the government and has done so in the past when they have brought new flights. But we want them to be real. We want them to come to fruition. And you only need to look at the statements which both the Chief Minister and Minister Daryanani issued on their social media platforms. When they actually, Mr Daryanani says, I am pleased to announce that. So they can't hide away from that point. The reality is that there is a serious question mark as to whether this can happen, and we hope it can happen. But the fact of the matter is that the announcement has been made without apparently the proper licensing in place. And let me just say this, with Minister Daryanani, we've seen it before. We saw it with the Linewall Road project when he was very quick to get, off the mark and jump the gun and say this is going to happen. With one of your reporters outside number 6 Commonplace, he said Linewall Road will happen, only for a few months later to be dropped like a hot brick by the Chief Minister because it was a failed project. I don't want this to be a failed project, but it is my responsibility as opposition spokesman for tourism and aviation to expose these things.
Mr Bossino, the Minister made it very clear in his statement last night that he knows of no impediments as to why this Airlink can't proceed.
But that speaks volumes about the point that I'm making, you see. We've exposed it, I've exposed it in a statement. I said, is there an issue? My statement was pretty tame. Europa Sur came up with this sort of story on Saturday. He announced it on Wednesday, I think it was, or Thursday. Europa Sur put a question mark over it on Saturday, citing sources from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, as I understand, or diplomatic sources, I think they said, on Saturday. I said, let's wait Monday to go by. Let's see if the government clarifies the matter. So I had to issue a statement on Tuesday. And for him to then say, well, I know of no impediment, that's not good enough. He's not saying we don't have an issue. That is what I expected him to say. The flights are going to happen. All the licensing is in place. I, as Minister for Tourism and as a representative of the Gibraltar government, which is on the other side of the deal, have done the proper due diligence. That's not what he said. He says it's a weak statement and a lame statement, quite frankly.
The Minister, Vijay Daryanani, accused you in his statement of engaging in the politics of gloating. And in fact, the only time the GSD has mentioned this flight has been to call it into question. So doesn't he have a point? He,
of course, doesn't have a point. I think as an individual, I think us as an opposition, and I've just said it in this interview, and I've said it publicly before, I've said it in Parliament. I will be the first one to congratulate him. I may not have specifically congratulated him in relation to this particular connection, and I'm glad that I didn't, quite frankly, but I have in relation to the others. But let's not go into the detail of that. The reality is, we as an opposition have a responsibility to expose these things. If he calls that gloating, so be it. I don't accept that. I don't accept that for 1 minute. It is our responsibility to expose these things so that people are aware that there is a question mark over this flight, and the government, quite frankly, today, as at today, has not clarified the position sufficiently.